Hello, you're very welcome along to the NFL Week 16 Matchbook podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey. We're a man down this week. The injury report came in late, but I guess, guys, Drew just couldn't handle all the stuff that happened in Week 15. He had such a good week himself that Rob, I guess, it just all got on top of him, and he was a late injury withdrawal here today.
He's got, I know Drew around this time of year has a real drinking problem with rum and eggnog. So I'm pretty sure he's just a little bit hungover, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and that's allowed at this time of year for sure. Suma, before we kind of get into the main takeaways, just very, very briefly on, you mentioned this off air, it was one of the craziest weekends of NFL action, definitely this year, but if not for a few years as well. Just everything that happened over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it started at around 4 p.m. our time with the World Cup final, which was also an incredible game. And that game ended like 10 or 15 minutes right before the first NFL slate. So we were just transitioning right into all that action. And I mean, Red Zone was insane on Sunday. Like so much stuff happening. The Patriots ending, the early slate ending with Dallas Jaguars, for example. It was just an amazing day of football.
Yeah, and Saturday, as Rob, you touched on, it was just, and you got off to yourself a 3-0 start with those Saturday games, but it was brilliant, a nice welcome change in the NFL to have Saturday games to just watch, really,
Agreed, and two of the three ended up being very, very good games. You thought the Colts game was going to be a dud at halftime, but you get the largest comeback in NFL history. And I thought Bills Dolphins at the night game was honestly one of the best games of the entire season. It was really back and forth. You could see that both those teams are pretty strong. I really enjoyed that, especially with like the whole setup with the snow and the fans throwing snowballs at Tyreek Hill in the end zone. And I thought that was just one of the games of the year.
Yeah, and even clearing out the pitch, but then there's snow in the stands. It was brilliant, like only in the NFL, to be honest with you. Let's get into some of the takeaways. Rob, you wanted to touch on, you hear these sometimes, people say this team is particularly good against the spread throughout the year, and this team isn't good against the spread throughout the year. Is there something in that at all, or?
I really wonder about this. So I noticed some consistent things. So there's two games in particular last week which caught my eye. One was Kansas City and Houston. And Kansas City, for some reason or another now, seems to not be able to cover spreads anymore. When they're favored, they just don't win by margin. But you look at the box scores in these games and you're like, how are the Chiefs, like, how did the Chiefs game go to overtime last week? They had 502 total yards of offense and the Texans had 219. Like, there was a massive, staggering difference in that game. And the Chiefs, I mean, the turnover margin was only -1 for them. It's not like they gave the Texans a ton of short fields. So, that's a head scratcher. And you really wonder, is this has like been repeatable for a long time now? And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you get a team like Cincinnati. Going back to the start of last year, Cincinnati against the spread is 25-10. Like, they just cover spreads. And last week, they covered a spread as a favorite where they averaged 3.8 yards per play, and they still end up winning the game by margin. The Lions, another team, constantly covering spreads, 21-10 against the spread since the start of last season. They don't play a particularly good game last week on the road at the New York Jets. The offense struggles to move the ball. They basically have they had a block punt return in that game for a TD, and they also had the late touchdown. But is this just randomness, or is this something repeatable? Because it seems like the same teams are very regularly coming out on the right side of games where they don't deserve to cover the spread. And I wonder if that eventually catches up to them. This is something that I'm going to be working on hard in the offseason to see if there's any predictability here with actual against the spread records and whether or not teams just get consistently overvalued and undervalued, and maybe like the market is missing something with one of these particular teams.
Yeah, because just very briefly on that, Rob, like say that stat 25-10 Bengals are against the spread. Like, how big is a sample size for you then? I know you're going to do a lot of work in the offseason, like you said, but how, like, that to me sounds like a massive sample size where the only conclusion I can draw from that is the market's underrating the Bengals throughout for the last 35 games, or?
It's massive for the NFL, but it's small for everything else in the world is the problem, right?
Yeah. True.
But yeah, I mean, like the reality is we don't know. And this is the challenge with betting the NFL and why it makes it such a great sport to bet on, because you have such limited data to work with. and you have to draw conclusions from this. And sometimes you're going to be right and sometimes you're going to be wrong, but we're never going to get a large enough sample with any of these teams in any particular season to say this is, what this team is.
And
Guys,
Suma,
we have our answer in the comments. Vegas knows.
Vegas knows. Only Vegas, by the way. The rest of the cities in the US, they don't know. The offshore sports books, all Matchbook in the UK, no, they don't know.
We haven't a clue now. Trust me on that.
Just Vegas knows. Vegas knows.
Again, coming from the UK and Ireland, and seeing every other sport we can watch now, we get this VAR, and VAR is corrupt, and the big teams are favored. But this Vegas knows things takes on its life of its own with the NFL. It's great to watch it, particularly on Twitter. Suma, I did see you nodding a few times. So before we get onto the weather, which I know you want to talk about, do you have any opinions on that spread? Like that Bengals stat does jump out to me as a perfect example, perhaps.
I probably have the same exact thoughts as Rob has. I think it's worth something to monitor in the or maybe research in the off season. Maybe there is some sort of bias towards some teams consistently outperforming market expectations, or maybe it's just variance. But for the Bengals, for instance, it's been 2 years, and even subjectively, you can make the point that this is a very good team that is getting. That is a well coached, at least on the defensive side. Zach Taylor's gotten better, so maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, and on this, just looking ahead to this week, again, chatting off here, we were saying that we do have plays, but a lot of the games it's tough to call with the weather at the moment. Just give people a background that aren't necessarily following weather reports. What sort of games are you monitoring at the moment?
Man, where do I start? So it starts tonight with the Jets game, rain and windy. There are like 17 miles per hour of wind, lots of rain to be expected throughout the game. Then we have another 2 wind games in Chicago, where we have like 22 to 25 miles per hour sustained winds. And it's also going to be super cold. It's going to be minus 16 degrees Celsius. It's, I guess, something around 7 degrees Fahrenheit. So you have the combination of wind and coldness. That's going to be very tough, I would guess, to play in those conditions. We have another crazy wind game in Cleveland against the Saints. Do you guys remember the Buffalo Patriots game from last year?
Yep, Monday Night Football.
Yes. Imagine that game, but just with cold temperatures. That's going to be Cleveland against the Saints. I don't think we are going to see lots of passes. And then we also have a few games where it's going to be very cold, like Kansas City, 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is probably in the minus 14, minus 15 kind of range. We have a cold game in Baltimore as well, and we have a cold game in Tennessee against Houston is also going to be very cold. There are also a few more games with winds in the 10 to 15 range, but that's usually not a risk factor.
Yeah, and Rob, very briefly before we move on, I guess it's I see a couple of people in the comments mentioning live betting angles. That it's hard to give advice before the fact, but I guess it's obviously maybe watch the first quarter or two, see what's happening maybe with the eye test as well as some stats perhaps.
So what Patrick in the chat is referring to here with live betting, this was a situation that came up last year in that game that Suma was mentioning, Patriots Bills. And the wind in this game is actually not a crosswind. It is going to be from one side of one end zone to the other, essentially. So based off who has the ball in a specific quarter, they're going to have a big advantage in that quarter. Because if you're facing the wind, you have no chance to actually throw the ball. And also punts are going to be like, remember the punts in that game last year into the wind. Some of them went for like 10 yards. They were absurdly bad. So we'll see if the live market adjusts to that this year. It was a huge edge in that particular game last year doing specific quarter betting. But that's something I'm looking out for this week as well.
And then last one on the weather then, Suma. So if someone's saying with low temperature, wet conditions, everyone's like, it's going to affect the offense, Does it have any effect on defense there? Skyfish on the YouTube comments wants to know.
So when it's wet, it's usually a little bit advantageous for the offense because the offense knows where the route directions are going to be and where the ball lands. And then for defenders, if it's a wet pitch, it's usually a little bit harder to change directions. So that's usually the angle for why offenses have a small advantage when it comes to wet conditions. But it also depends on the severity. So if it's pouring or if it's really snowing insanely much, that's also a bad recipe for offensive success. So, but if it's just a little bit of rain and a wet pitch or a little bit of snow, there's usually no issue towards the over. It starts becoming an issue when it's really pouring or really snowing throughout the game, and then wind would kill everything.
Okay, yeah. So keep an eye on Suma and Rob's Twitter handles for sure around Sunday evening, because there will definitely be some live action, and maybe there might be an edge or two to get. And we're going to cover 5 games with Drew missing here today, and we'll do our any other bets and then best week 16 bets. Incidentally, the lads did go 3-0 on best bets this week, so well done. I think Assume was on a massive roll himself. He went over 48, and the Cowboys and Jags just got over there by about a ridiculous amount of points. Steelers +3, and then the Bears +9. So listen, some great, solid bets there. We're going to get into the first game, which is the Giants at the Vikings. We'll go to you first on this, Rob. I'll take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com. So Vikings are 1.48 favorites on the money line. 2.88 is the Giants currently. 4.5 is the line. That's a plus to the Giants, and 48.5 is the total. So Rob, I was out on Saturday, and I saw on him, you know, when everyone has these comebacks, where were you? I was there, saw the screen in the pub, and it said, I think it said 36-7 to the Colts. And I said, geez, Rob was spot on. The Vikings are absolutely useless. So looked at my phone the next morning to watch the YouTube highlights. Got the shock of my life with this comeback. So basically, a long-winded way of saying, where are we now a week on from the Vikings after that game? Talk to me.
I don't think that game has an impact whatsoever on market. I mean, I think a lot of it, listen, you have to credit the Vikings for coming back from that. Like, that's a huge deficit no matter what. And people could say, oh, the Colts couldn't run out the clock because Jonathan Taylor got injured or whatever. But you're coming back from a 33-point deficit. There's not many teams that can do that. So credit to them. But ultimately, the final score of the game is very indicative of where the Vikings are at right now, which is, just still not very good. The only challenge is I don't think the Giants are very good either. Like, these are two teams that I would typically be wanting to fade. I will say what was particularly different about the Giants this week, and I think I've touched on it a few times before, but we've kind of seen their offense just like trend downhill so far this year. And that's because the play action game had not been working for them. Their EPA off play action the first 8 weeks of the season was through the roof good. Then it completely fell off a cliff as other opponents knew what was coming. The Giants used play action at their lowest rate of the entire season against Washington this past week, and that worked for them. I mean, they didn't have a super strong offensive output by any stretch of the imagination, but the offense looked a lot better than it has looked in a long time. I wonder, and this is what makes it very challenging for me to break down this game, if they do end up going back to more play action looks in this one, because the Vikings are one of the worst teams at defending play action in the entire league. They're 31st in EPA per play against play action passes. They're 28th in success rate. So that's typically what the Giants have been doing. They got away from it last week. I don't know what the Giants offense is going to be this week. I think another factor to touch on here, and why I would just ever so slightly lean to the Giants in this game, is that we do have a very blitz heavy team, which is the New York Giants. They blitz more than any other team in the NFL. And you always have to bring in the Kirk Cousins numbers against the blitz, which honestly are not that much of a downgrade this season. But his yards per attempt does fall from 7.5 yards per attempt to 5.6 when he has been blitzed this season. And we've seen a couple games where he's looked horrendous when he has been blitzed this season. One of them was Dallas. One of them was Philadelphia early on in the year. So slight lean to the Giants, but ultimately, this is kind of in and around where I thought the market would eventually settle here. So it's just not a strong opinion for me.
Yeah, and Suma, you're very similar in that you're leaning Giants. And I guess, like Rob, throughout the year, you have loved fading both these teams. So it's a kind of tough when those two teams face each other. Where are you at with the line at the moment? You're just leaning, I think, Giants at the moment.
Yeah, in terms of the Vikings being overrated, I have a fun number to share.
Oh.
Since week 8, the Giants are 2-4-1. They've been absolutely bad and on the decline since week 8. 2 wins only. And over that stretch, they still have a higher DVOA value than the Minnesota Vikings, who went 6-2. So I think that tells you all you need to know about the current state of the Vikings. Both teams are ranking Giants 24th and the Vikings 27th in over that stretch for what it's worth. But first of all, I don't think that it's the greatest situational spot for the Vikings to be in, coming off that biggest comeback in NFL history. They clinched their division. The third seed is basically locked, though, so they are only trying or playing for the second seed. And Kevin O'Connor also talked publicly about the possibility of resting some players or limiting their snap counts if they are banked up. And there are some guys like Eric Kendricks, who was limited earlier this week in practice. So that might be just something to think about. Overall, I don't think that, or I'm struggling to get towards a 4.5 gap on the spread between these two teams. If you look at some stuff like DVOA, the Giants are better, schedule just EPA per play. The Vikings are better, but both only by a slim margin. So they're pretty close together over the course of the season. The only thing that really separates them, in my opinion, is the record for once, and that the Vikings offense is probably more capable of getting towards that ceiling game with their passing offense with Justin Jefferson. But I also think that with starting center Garrett Bradbury out again, there was a nice matchup for the Giants along or in the trenches with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams going against that interior offensive line of the Vikings. And Rob mentioned it already. Kirk Cousins against the Blitz, 23rd out of 33 qualifying quarterbacks in EPA per play against the man. Same story, 23rd. The Giants rank first in blitz and man coverage rate. So even though the Giants defense is not very good from a talent perspective, I would expect the Vikings to run the ball on them, to have something through the air with Justin Jefferson. But the Vikings also have never shown us any consistency this season. And there's certainly the possibility of the Giants rocking blitz and man coverage and forcing Kirk Cousins into some errors. On the other side, the Giants might probably be able to run the ball, get something in play action, and this could be enough to make this a much closer game and maybe a last field goal wins kind of game.
Yeah, it's definitely a lean to the Giants with the guys, but probably not enough to get us there with a bet. And you don't have to have a bet in every game. I just think there's too much question marks probably with that Vikings sensational comeback that sometimes you just can't really legislate in the numbers. So we might just leave that off. But yeah, fascinating game in store, the Giants at the Vikings. Move on to the second game we're covering, which is the Lions at the Panthers. Massive game for both teams here. The Lions 7-7, Panthers 5-9. The Lions are the 1.75 favorites, and you can back Panthers with 2.5 points head start on the handicap line, and 44 is the total. Suma, I'll stick to you on this one. The Panthers are still chasing the Bucks, somehow are still in a chance of winning the division, which is crazy stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely, they can win the
best division to watch.
Yes, absolutely. So playoff scenarios in general are pretty wild, in my opinion. There's a ton of leverage this week. For instance, I went through the NFC tie-breaking stuff this week, and there's a scenario in which the Detroit Lions win their next two games, and they could still fall behind the Packers in the NFC playoff race. If the Packers go 3-0 the rest of the way, they will be ahead of the Lions because they win the tiebreaker on strength of victory, which is pretty ridiculous. When you think about that insane run that the Lions are on right now, and they could still fall to the Packers in Week 18 at Lambeau Field, also on the road. So pretty interesting to watch all these playoff scenarios. When it comes to this game, I was asking myself, what did the Panthers really do over the past couple of weeks? Since Sam Darnold is there, they had one good game against the Seahawks, who were without both starting defensive tackles and who are the worst defense by DVOA over the past 6 or 7 weeks. So the Seahawks can stop no one, and the Panthers were able to beat them by gaining basically 6 yards per pop on the ground and moving that whole defensive line a few yards back. Other than that, the Panthers have not really done anything. I don't think that their defense is particularly playing that well. And the offense is extremely limited once they cannot run the ball, which they struggled to do so last week against the Steelers. And on the other side, we are looking at a top 5 offense at this point right now. The Lions had some issues against the Jets last week, but that was pretty to be expected when you play against a really good defense. But they also once again showed us why they are so good right now, because they locked up DJ Chark on the outside against Sauce Gardner. They did not target Sauce Gardner once in this game. They were just trying to, hey, DJ Chark, go out there, be our decoy against Sauce Gardner, and then we will try to find other matchups. They played a lot of man beaters on third down early on to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, because they knew that the Jets were playing aggressively man coverage. Then Jets had to switch to more zone coverage throughout the game. And then the Lions had another few counters. They went, I think, 3 times deep into the red zone against the Jets, and they only scored 6 points on those drives. So I'm completely convinced that this Lions offense, they might get limited at some point against the better defenses in the league, but I don't think that the Carolina Panthers are there. I think that the Lions defense have a very good and sustainable offense. They should put up some points, and I'm not sure I can trust Sam Darnold and that offense to go toe-to-toe with the Lions in this one.
Okay. Yeah, and I know, Rob, you're fairly neutral on the line at the moment, but on the total, you're leaning under. So at the moment on Matchbook, it's 44.0.
Yes, so 44 being a key number in the NFL in terms of totals. I do lean slightly to the under. So I agree with pretty much everything Suma said about the Panthers offense. I'm not high on the Panthers offense. I think like this anointing or like Sam Darnold like could possibly be it for them. No, I don't think so. Like his average depth of target is super low. They're running very vanilla offense. I don't think he's the solution. This comes down to the Lions offense, which we're getting into, I don't want to say narrative-based stuff here because it's definitely supported by stats. Like when we say Goff is worse in cold weather, or, we're looking at like 15 Fahrenheit in Charlotte this week, that's supported by substantial evidence. That's not that he has never had a good game in cold weather before. It's just if you look at the majority of his career and you were to separate his games by cold weather and different temperatures and indoors, he's significantly worse in cold weather. So there's that. And then on top of that, the Panthers defense is not to the level of the Patriots or the Cowboys. They're pretty close to on par with the Jets in terms of EPA per play this year, like very, very close. And every time we've seen the Lions take a step up in class to play a better defense, they just have not performed well offensively. This is a Lions offense, that has cooked all these bad defenses, but then they play the Patriots and they get shut out. They play the Cowboys and they score 6 points in that game. A little bit misleading because Jamal Williams fumbled at the goal line in that game, but best case scenario, they were scoring 2 touchdowns in that game. We see them play the Jets last week. I mean, those weren't all offensive points. They got a punt block for a touchdown. They scored a 51-yard touchdown like late in the game. Big chunk play. It's been a real grind for the Lions offense when they've taken a step up in class this year. And I do think highly of the Carolina defense. I just don't see a lot of points in this one is ultimately what it comes down to. I especially don't see them from Darnold. Darnold averages way too long to throw, right? Like for a guy whose average depth of target is so low and he's averaging over 3 seconds to release the ball, that's not going to work against the Lions. And the Lions pass rush has gotten so much better as the year has gone on, like consistently getting better and better. I think 44 is a touch too high when you consider the weather, the fact that I think, honestly, neither of these offenses are going to move forward. I can't believe where I've gotten to with Detroit as a team, because earlier in the year, they couldn't stop a wet paper bag, basically. But at this point now, they're improving, especially against the pass. And Carolina's probably method to success here is just try to grind away, run the ball. I don't think that's conducive to an over. So I have a strong lean to the under in this game.
It does have that sort of feeling of a game of an under game, really. Suma, very briefly, any thoughts on the 44 total?
No strong opinion, to be honest.
Strong opinion. You're leaving me. I think Rob made a good case. I'm going to lock it in, Rob, to be honest with you. I was going into the game saying first 2 games, no bets.
We are rolling with Rob here.
I'm rolling with Rob. Under 44.0, we're going to lock that in and move on to the third game we're going to cover, which is Bengals at the Patriots. And we'll take a look at the betting as we have it on Matchbook.com. Bengals 1.62, Patriots are 2.5 on the money line. Patriots are getting 3-point head start, and the total is 41.5. So Rob, we'll stick to you on this one. In terms of a bet here, you're like Patriots earlier in the week, but right now at this number, you're staying away.
There's a lot of things at play here. Okay. For one, the Bengals just cover spreads over and over, right? So, that the early numbers on the Patriots, I completely get it. I don't think highly of New England, but I do think that in the eyes of the average person, people think that New England is worse than they actually are. In this particular matchup, you have a team in New England that has the second best pressure rate in the league and a team that doesn't blitz a whole lot, which I think is a very good matchup against Joe Burrow. If you look at Joe Burrow's career, he has consistently been great against the blitz. If teams can get pressure on him without blitzing, it's a little bit more of a struggle. The Bucs were able to accomplish this last week. On the other side of things, I know everything. Like Mac Jones, he doesn't pass the eye test. He's not a good quarterback. He's well below average. But you look at the passing grade of Mac Jones when he's pressured versus when he's kept clean. And if we take Pro Football Focus's numbers, he's a 25.2 grade when he's pressured. When he's kept clean, it's 88.4. So if New England can keep him clean, I think that there is an opportunity for success. Now, Trey Hendrickson is probably playing in this game. He's dealing with a significant injury. Who knows what Trey Hendrickson's full potential is in this game? Who knows what Sam Hubbard's full potential is in this game if both of those guys end up suiting up? So ultimately, I do like the matchup for New England, but then you get down to a market number of 3, and you're basically like, well, the Bengals kind of just got to win the game. Like, there's not a ton of scenarios where they win by exactly 1 or 2, and it's really hard to argue against that. So, I mean, I'm kind of torn in this game altogether. I understand all the early movement on New England. I kind of agree with that, but now I can see why there would be interest in the Bengals at -3, especially when I reference the fact that they just talked about it off the top of the show, right? This team does is cover spreads. They play a bad game, they cover the spread. So unless they play the Cleveland Browns, they basically cover the spread. But even then, they did that a few weeks ago.
I don't think I'll be backing against Bengals against the spread the rest of the year at 25-10 to know that stat until you dig further into in the offseason. Maybe stay away from the games. As Summer, you are leaning towards the Bengals here. Just talk briefly about, because we didn't really get a chance to talk about the crazy end to the Patriots game and the lateral and everything that went on with that. Your thoughts on that wild couple of minutes?
I mean,
sorry, I asked now already.
Why does Jacoby Myers throw the football across the field? Rob wants something to say.
So, but here's the thing, okay? That play doesn't happen if the Raiders scored a touchdown to tie the game, which was clearly not a touchdown. It was ruled a touchdown on the field. It went to review. Now, the only view they have of it, somehow billion-dollar company in the NFL, the only view they have of this is this aerial view, sky high, but it's clear as day that the foot is out of bounds. And I don't know, so to me, the Patriots, the Raiders still would have had a chance to tie the game, but the outcome of that game is not indicative of, the Patriots should have won that game. They were favorites to win that game if that play gets overturned, and it spirals out of control. So I feel really bad for Jacoby Myers, because honestly, he should have never even been in that position. It's a boneheaded play. I don't want to defend the player. That's the brain dead move. You absolutely can't do that. But it was a fabricated touchdown that went the Raiders' way before that, which made it 24-24, and that's what created that play.
And Suma, people are saying that just how crazy the play was, that maybe for that split second he thought they were losing the game or something. Is there anything in that? Or
he said that
stretch,
they said that they knew the score, and the whole purpose of the play was running and maybe try to get something going there with a miracle. And then Ramondre Stevenson just tosses him the ball, and that guy probably was completely shocked and was scrambling around and sees Mac Jones somewhere and tries to hit the ball to him. I mean, that shit happens once every 5 or 6 years, and crazy stuff.
Yeah, and going, there's obviously been a lot of fallout from that. Would you factor any of that in? I guess it's hard, similar to the Vikings, come back to legislate for that. But here you're kind of leaning towards the Bengals on the spread.
Yeah, this is a classic like hashtag square don't care play for me, because I mean, when we look at the two offenses, correct? The Patriots offense is completely dreadful this season. Like, I don't know why Matt Patricia is still the offensive coordinator there. I have zero clue. The whole offense is just run the ball, throw some screens left and right, and then some vertical shots down the field, which is not really Mac Jones' game. Mac Jones this season, out of 34 qualifying passers, 29th in EPA per play, 31st in success rate, and his passing rate is also way down from last year, which makes me believe that a major part of that is that he's throwing some tougher balls that are not really in his arsenal, and Matt Patricia just doesn't care at all. The offensive line, once a strength of the Patriots, is also not playing very well. They have some communication issues up front. And guess who the offensive line coordinator is for the Patriots? It's also Matt Patricia. So everything comes together. I think that this Patriots offense is really, really bad. On the other side, there's a top 5 offense that really proved that they can solve problems this season, problems that they struggled with in the past. And then it comes down to, is the Patriots defense and maybe special teams, are those enough for me to maybe get me off of the Bengals or get me towards the Patriots? And it's really a hard case to make, in my opinion. I mean, the Patriots defense, they're good. They're good at stopping the run. They play the classic man coverage, cover one, single high defense, which Joe Burrow has been very good against in his career, but the Patriots are also very good when running their defense. So it's kind of a strength on strength. But I just think that the way that the Bengals defense plays right now, they are not super good. They're probably, from a talent perspective, somewhere in the middle. But Big Lou makes some crazy adjustments at halftime. I don't know how they do it. That might be something for Rob to monitor, and when it comes to why are they winning all those spreads. But it's just hard for me to believe that this current state of the Patriots offense, without some drastic mistakes from the Bengals, can hang on.
Yeah, I think we're just there to lock in Bengals -3. I think something Rob said about realistically the 1 or 2 pointer, it's just a key note. I just think that we'll just get that in. And so locked it in. They're currently 1.9 Cincinnati Bengals. Let's hope to make it 26-10 against the spread. And that'll be something I know personally I'll be keeping an eye on throughout the season. And then I'll be messaging Rob throughout the offseason asking when he's going to do that body of work he's got ahead of him. So I hope you all look forward to that. We move on to the least competitive game that we are going to be covering, which is the Seahawks at the Chiefs. We'll take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com. You can currently back the Seahawks on the money line, 5.0, Chiefs 1.23. It's a 10-point head start for the Seahawks, and the total is 49. Simon, we touched on a little bit of not to go down this avenue the whole time, but Chiefs not being very good against the spread. A lot of the times, I guess, they're having 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-point spreads to cover. And then, you know, if it's a game won in the last quarter, they might not be pushing as much. Is there something in that, or?
Hard to tell. I mean, what Rob has said, that there is no reason for the Texans to hang in that game last week, because the Chiefs offense was so good, so efficient, 500 plus yards. Like, I just don't know what happened there. To me, that's some form of variance, and not that the Chiefs are suddenly playing bad or choking away some stuff or anything. I just think that it's some form of variance. When it comes to this matchup, I just think that the Seahawks match up so poorly with the Chiefs, and that's also reflected in the spread. That was, I think, -9 earlier this week. Now we are around -10, -10.5. I think there's a lot of logic behind that move. The Seahawks defense, like I said, they are the worst defense since week 10, and they did not face too many good offenses. They got hammered on the ground by the Panthers, by the Rams, by the Bucks all of a sudden. they only played one good offense over that stretch, and those were the 49ers, maybe the Raiders, but the Raiders also dropped 40 points in overtime. And the Niners didn't have a lot of issues moving the ball, even though it was Brock Purdy's first road start on a short week in a very loud environment. So the Seahawks didn't play a lot of good offenses, and they still got absolutely shredded. So there's really no reason to believe that this defense can hold up against Patrick Mahomes and company. And then on the other side, I think with Tyler Lockett, we could be having some sort of a discussion that the Seahawks could force the Chiefs into a shootout. But if it's only DK Metcalf on the outside, no Tyler Lockett, who was approaching 1,000 yards this season and has been playing really well with that offensive line, I don't think that the Chiefs pass rush is so bad like some people make it to be. I think that their defensive line is kind of solid. They might have an advantage in obvious passing down situations, and then it's Geno Smith probably playing catch up from behind a very young offensive tackle tandem on the road in that environment that doesn't smell like the greatest place to be in. It's a high spread, but I think it's very reasonable, and we should not be surprised if the Chiefs come out with a 35-point performance and the Seahawks playing for the cover late in the game.
Oh, you're muted, Daniel.
I think we were about 4 or 5 weeks in a row, no issue there. And you know you're in trouble when someone comes back to you very early on. But yeah, Rob, the Seahawks were a lot of people's, I guess, dark horses mid-season. It's not that it's fallen off a cliff. It's sort of the last couple of weeks in particular. But you agree with a lot of Sumo's points, I guess, on the matchups here, and they're not well matched up against the Chiefs.
I do. I think the Seahawks are playing a lot closer to the preseason expectation now. And they're, we're just starting to realize, okay, the Seahawks, they performed really well at the beginning of the year, but that's fallen off a cliff. I think Suma brings up a great point about losing Tyler Lockett. There's 89 players in the NFL this year that have 40 or more receptions. Tyler Lockett on 3rd and 4th down ranks 4th of those 40 players in first downs per target. So he has been a great safety valve for Geno Smith in these situations. They lose him. They have not been able to run the ball, and that's kind of been correlated, I think, with the demise of this offense. And you look at the Chiefs when they've come back from their bye week, they're 8th in defensive success rate against the run. They have, allow a successful run 37% of the time since their bye week. I don't think this is a game where Seattle gets back on track. Then on the other side of things, I mean, the Seahawks have a bottom 10 pressure rate in the league. I just don't see the path for them to be able to contain Patrick Mahomes without generating pressure. I mean, we look at Patrick Mahomes this season when he has a clean pocket. He has 8.7 yards per attempt. He has a 77% completion percentage. I think this is a game where the Chiefs just move the ball with ease. I know it's cold, but I still think this is a number that they can cover. I see Difficult here in the chat who's posting the play-by-plays last week of why the Chiefs didn't cover that spread. Even factoring for these plays that happened in the game, I would have had the Chiefs expected to win this game by 18.5 points against the Texans last week. I think they're kind of undervalued just based off the virtue that, by virtue of not having covered spreads recently, but tough for me here. I mean, I laid it with Kansas City at 10. I like it a little bit less, but I still don't mind it. I think this should be north of 10. I think the Chiefs are going to put up a lot of points in this game.
Yeah, I think that I think we could lock in the -10 on the Chiefs there. I think we're enough there, particularly with Suma, and then onto you, Rob. So we'll lock that in fishy as a bet. Insights.matchbook.com is the place to find all those bets. They'll be fully recapped on Friday morning. We want to move on to the 5th game, which is Packers at Dolphins. And take a look at betting as we have it at matchbook.com. You can back Packers on the money line 2.72. Dolphins favorite at 1.52. The Packers getting a 3.5 point head start, and 50 is the total. Rob, Drew, I just texted Drew after the injury report came in, obviously. And Drew said to me that he reckons the Packers could win this week and put themselves right in the playoff picture. Would you go along with that at all?
It's tough to say because it's one game, but the Packers offense does feel different than it was earlier in the year, particularly with Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson together on the field. It's a very, very limited sample size when they play together this year. but Aaron Rodgers' numbers with both of them on the field are a yards per attempt of greater than 10 yards, a passer rating of 108.8, 59.4% success rate. So there's an opportunity for it here. I don't want to say never, but it's a tough Dolphins team that they're matching up against this week. And the Packers, they have a weak defense overall. They struggle both against the run and the pass. That's not to say that they can't play, step up in class in any specific game, but ever since Rashawn Gary's been out of the lineup, they have to blitz a lot more because they don't get to the quarterback if they don't do that. And Tua's been very, very good against the blitz this season. Some of the best numbers you're going to see in the NFL, 64% completion rate, 9.1 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, no picks. He just gets the ball out quickly to Tyreek Hill or Jaden Waddle, and they do the rest. So I'm optimistic about the Packers offense going forwards. I don't necessarily think they match up all that well with Miami in this particular game. This is one of the few that's not going to be affected by bad weather conditions this week, but I can definitely see this being a pretty high scoring game with both teams scoring into the mid-20s here.
Yes, you like the over. Suma, so comment here from Randy saying he's drew on Packers to win the NFC before MNF, which is around 150-1. Drew did also say in that text that he does reckon they're outside shot for the NFC. Are you a bit more confident than Rob is on the Packers at all, or?
They have to survive Miami somehow. I think that their offense has really come to life. Since week 8, they rank 8th in offensive DVOA. Since week 10, they rank 3rd. I think that the emergence of Christian Watson really gave them some life. And now they have Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson in the lineup. Their run game has also gotten better. So I think there's a case to be made for the Packers to run the table. They have to beat Miami this week somehow. I think it's possible. I would not really bet on it, but I think there is the potential of a shootout. And with the state of the Miami Dolphins defense, especially their passing defense, I think there's a realistic scenario that the Packers can, with their offense, go toe-to-toe with Miami here. Weather conditions are really good. It's very rare this week to have good weather conditions, but this game will have it. Like I said, the Packers offense has gotten much better in recent weeks. The passing game good, run game good. I think that there is a clear path for the Packers to have success against that Miami defense. But on the other side, the same rule applies here, because the Packers defense since week 8, they rank 20th in defensive DVOA. Since week 10, it's 24th, and especially their run defense. It's been a common theme for the Packers in recent years. It's the same this year. They cannot stop the run, and Mike McDaniel was the run game coordinator of all the Niners offenses that really pounded the Packers run defense in recent years. Also, last week, all of a sudden, Mike McDaniel pulls out like 10 or 12 under center runs with a jet motion attached, which we have not seen a lot from the Miami Dolphins offense. So that shows me that they are kind of changing their offense a little bit, use more under center runs, maybe get more out of their run game to open up more space in the play action game. And no matter how I spin it, I always arrive at the conclusion that the Packers defense is not really built to give the Dolphins too many issues. I think both offenses should have some success. The number or the total has moved significantly throughout the week. I think that also made a lot of sense. 2 good offenses, 2 questionable defenses. We might get a shootout here, in my opinion.
Will we lock in 50.0 on the over?
That's okay.
Yeah,
yep.
We'll lock that in as a bet. The third one there. So it's over 50.0 currently, the Packers at the Dolphins. And we'll move on to our any other bets section. Rob, you've got a couple here, so I'll let you take them away. Firstly, it's the Bears plus 8.5 is the current line.
Yeah, so actually, I'll do them both together, Dan, because they have the same sort of angle to both of them. So Bears plus 8.5 and the Saints getting 3 against the Browns. And typically when you see extreme weather conditions like this and you see the total dropping, the points are more valuable with the underdog than they previously were. There's less variance in these low total games. But if you're turning two games essentially into, I don't want to say run only games, but run first games, I think it mitigates the advantage that the favorites have in these type of games. So particularly with Buffalo is not a team that's just going to run the ball down another team's throat and stop the run all that well. And you're looking at sustained winds of upwards of 20 miles an hour in Chicago this week with gusts up to 35 miles an hour. I think the Bears are able to keep it close just because of the fact that when you turn it into, like what I said, more of a running game and you have Justin Fields and a team that has been able to run the ball well this year in the Chicago Bears, I think that really mitigates the difference between the two teams. And with the Saints against the Browns, like the Browns can definitely run the ball a whole lot better than the Saints, and they have for the most part this season. However, when both teams know what the other team is going to do, I don't think that there's much separating the Saints and the Browns, particularly when you look at New Orleans, what they've struggled with as a defense this year. It's been generating a pass rush. That's not what they're going to struggle with in this game because the Browns are not passing the ball a whole lot, especially not with Deshaun Watson, the way that his arm has looked. So I just naturally am inclined to take both underdogs here in games where I think the weather conditions are like more, create more of a coin flip situation than if these games were being played in optimal conditions.
Okay, yeah, a couple of similar angles for the Bears plus 8.5 and the Saints plus 2.5. Incidentally, that Saints game is going to be the lowest total, isn't it? 32.0 currently. Is that correct? Yeah,
it is quite low. I mean, listen, there's concerns, and it's been talked about a lot this week about New Orleans being a dome team heading to very cold conditions. How are they going to? At the end of the day, this is just two football teams, both who are just going to try to run the ball down the other's throat. And by the way, I really like the Saints offense if they run Taysom Hill a lot more here, rather than having Andy Dalton just completely hand off. I think the Saints can, throw a lot of different wrinkles at the Browns that they haven't seen in a while. So I just, like I said, you've seen the totals been bet down heavily in these games, but not a lot of movement towards the underdogs. Right. And I think that the totals moving down creates value on the underdogs.
And that does make sense. And a quick follow-up on the Bears bet here. So Randy likes Bills in the teaser, -2, -2.5. Do you think Bears are live for an upset, or do you just think that they'll sneak in under that 8.5?
I think the Bears are live. I think when you're dealing with weather conditions that are extreme, like the Bills offense, clean conditions, they smoke the Bears in all likelihood, right? Like I would lay 8.5 with the Bills if it was just a regular September day with no bad conditions. But again, you're neutralizing the strength of one of the teams and opening it up to their weakness, which is run defense. So I don't like the Bills in a teaser piece this week. I think that lots of people will, because you can capture the 7, you can capture the 3. They fit that foundational Wong teaser. To me, that's a game that I completely will want to avoid from a Wong teaser point of view.
Okay, yeah, interesting thoughts there. But stay away from the Bills and the teasers. Suma, Christmas Day, 9:30. You're liking the Broncos here at the Rams, -2.5 as one of your any other bets.
Yes, the number has already moved a lot, but I would still like it at -2.5 at some reduced juice. When we look at both teams and we go unit for unit, starting at the quarterback, going all the way down until we reach special teams, like I think there is no unit on the Rams that is better than the Broncos. Like quarterback, offensive line, wide receivers, defensive line, linebackers. We can maybe talk about Josie Jewell against Bobby Wagner. Safeties, Broncos have Justin Simmons. Patrick Surtain is at least equal to Jalen Ramsey. So from a very simplistic view, I think there is no unit in this matchup where the Broncos are worse than the Rams. The Rams are a dead team to me. The Broncos have shown some life, especially on the offense in recent weeks. I mean, last week, I think there were 7 tackles for a loss by the Cardinals, like 5 or 6 sacks, an interception, and the Broncos still found a way to really get their run game going and score 24 points at the end. And that really tells me that they are still playing for something. Their offense is getting better. They have moved Jerry Jeudy towards let's say, a natural X receiver position that somehow suits him better. They might get Cortland Sutton back this week. Aaron Donald was DNP yesterday. Even if he can somehow manage to play, I don't see a lot of reasons for why they should waste Aaron Donald in a completely meaningless Week 16 game if he's not 100%. So top to bottom, Denver is a better team. Denver has been playing better lately. I think that the emotional or motivational angle for the Broncos is still very high. And yeah, anything under a field goal for me is Denver in this one.
Yeah, Suma touched on the line moving. So alternative handicaps, if you want to get that -2.5, it's only slightly reduced juice. I think it's around 187 currently on Matchbook. We will go to best bets. I touched on it early in the show. The lads went 3-0. I'm not putting Drew in as an official best bet, but I did text him for a quick takeaway, and his takeaway was to back the Packers this week. So, and for the NFC, despite the comments there, even at post Jalen Hurts injury not being as bad as first feared, he does like them for the NFC at current prices. So yeah, we'll go to you, Rob, for best Week 16 bets. We're on a roll at the moment on the podcast. This is the last one of the year, so take it away. No pressure.
Yeah, the Raiders took some money at +3. I think that's created a valuable bet on the Steelers -2.5. It's no surprise. I think for people who've been watching the content that I produce for a while now, they know that I've been higher on the Steelers than market. That will continue. But if you look at Pittsburgh's games this year, they're 5-2 when TJ Watt is on the field. The only losses in that span were the Ravens a couple weeks ago, a very misleading loss because Mitch Trubisky turned it over 3 times, coming in relief of Kenny Pickett, and the Bengals. So they basically lost to 2 above average teams this year. When they take a step down in class, they've performed well. I don't think highly of the Raiders. All in all, we look at the last couple weeks. I think they lost to the Patriots last week. If I'm thinking about the true outcome of that game, they lost to Baker Mayfield on 2 days of being able to look at a playbook on Thursday Night Football a couple weeks ago. And the biggest problem for the Raiders is their offensive line. It's consistently been an issue for them all season long. When they face teams that can generate pressure, they struggle. They've played 4 teams this year that are in the top half of the league in terms of pressure rate. They've lost to the Cardinals, the Titans, the Jags. Their only win was last week against the Patriots. And again, I would argue that was actually a loss, although the scoreboard doesn't say it. So I actually think Pittsburgh is much better than the Raiders, even with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow returning. I'm not buying into Las Vegas here. I like Pittsburgh laying 2.5. I think that's a short price.
Yeah, currently 1.93 Steelers, so -2.5. We'll lock that in as a best bet for Rob. And Suma, your best bet is a game we spoke about earlier on, but you do like Lions -2.5.
Yes, I like the Lions here. Great offense, much better offense than on the other side, and I don't have too much, or let's call it enough, trust in the Panthers to believe that they will somehow shut down that Lions offense. The Lions have a really, really good offensive line. The Panthers have been very inconsistent and kind of struggling in terms of applying pressure this season. Their run defense got completely torched by the Steelers last week. I think that the offensive line from the Lions can basically impose their will on the Panthers here. And then on the other side, I just don't see how Sam Darnold and that offense is really able to keep pace with the Lions. To make our show picks available, let's just take anything like 24-14 Lions. So Rob gets his under, and I will get my Lions -2.5.
That sounds like a plan to me, guys. We're done for week 16, and we're done for this calendar year. We decided to give the guys their belated bye week for them for week 17. So they're coming back refreshed in the new year. And it is around that Christmas time. I know people will be looking for content. You can follow the guys individually as well. But the Matchbook NFL pod will be back for week 18 with Drew, full complement. But I'd like to thank on behalf of Matchbook and all the viewers. My thanks to Drew, who's not with us today. But Rob and Suma, guys, really enjoyed working with you over the last few weeks. Rob, any plans for the it's not off season in terms of NFL, like it's just like I don't even know what I'm saying. Like Christmas Day, there's 3 games, first time ever.
That's what I was gonna say. There's no rest for the wicked. Yeah, it's just gonna be watching football and laying on the couch and with family. But yeah, happy holidays to everyone out there. Hope you enjoy it. Man, these Christmas Day games, the beginning of the year, they look like this is going to be the best Christmas ever. And now I'm just going through the card. I'm like, ooh, yeah, it's going to take some heavy boozing on Christmas this year to make those watchable.
Yeah, Suma, Christmas Day plans with the NFL, with 3 games now to cover in the NFL. How are you going to fit it in?
It's tough with a very tight family schedule and the scheduling of all those NFL games. Like in the US, there's usually like the 25th is the biggest Christmas celebrating day, and for us over here it starts at the 24th. So I will have family over here. I will probably miss the early slate and then be back to watch the late slate, and then on Christmas Day on the 25th, it's the same story. Lots of family stuff, and I will watch the Broncos-Rams game in the late slate then.
Yeah, like for the UK and Ireland, similar to Suma time schedule. So it's 6 o'clock, 9:30, and 1:20. Tom Brady. I would have, like you said, Rob, I would have signed off on this card start of the season saying they're pretty decent games. Tom Brady in prime time, Christmas Day, Rob. What more do you want? And look, it's a massive game still somehow.
We can, you know what? We can bet on it, so I'm not complaining. You know, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I'm definitely falling asleep on the couch watching books, having gone through all the games. But yeah, my thanks to the guys. Insights on Matchbook.com if you want a full recap, lot being thrown at you. If you want to catch up on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and the guys will be back first week of January. But for now, take care. Have a great Christmas. More importantly, enjoy the NFL, and I hope you win a few quid. Bye-bye.